All right, so official welcome to the talk Tobacco is Medicine. This is a talk I've been super passionate about for a number of years now. And there's a large reason why we're all here. Everyone, almost everyone on the planet has heard of tobacco. And that's the truth. It is one of the most well-known plants and has a lot of controversy around it. And before I start the talk, I want to just acknowledge my teachers that have taught me the way of using and working with this medicine, the indigenous of North, South, and Central America that have been using this since the beginning of time and really, used it as a gift in a way of medicine. And then to the wisdom and the tobacco plant. I'm so grateful for all the lessons and teachings that I've gotten through working with this plant and this plant teacher. And before this talk, just did some research, went on the CDC website and actually looked at some of the numbers when it comes to what the death rate was. And I was shocked. And the CDC says that 1 in every 5 deaths in America is from smoking cigarettes. And I was just blown away. 1 in every 5 deaths. This is bigger than any war. This is bigger than any pandemic. This is a huge issue that's taking people that we love's lives. And we may be connected to someone who has smoked and has passed away because of misuse and the relationship with tobacco. And so after reading that, I was like, man, this mission is big. This is such an important way, important to spread this teaching and to rebuild the relationship to this plant, because it's crazy to say that tobacco is medicine for one person and then poisonous for another. And that is the whole flow of today's talk. The relationship and why I picked tobacco is, I grew up with DARE. I grew up with a family of non-smokers. I grew up in a really upper middle class community. And from that, I was taught that tobacco, you have to stay away from. Tobacco is poison. I would actually see people smoking cigarettes and polluting it and throwing it on the ground. I would smell people smoking cigarettes and just be repulsed. I would judge them. I would have open hatred. I remember one time I was at a beach and I was waiting for this guy to finish his cigarette and waiting for him to put it out and just throw it on the beach. And he did. And I approached him and I put it back in his hand. And I remember this like energy and this hatred that I had towards it. And it was a number of years later where I went to Peru and I started working with my teacher, Don Enrique, who's a maestro of the Shipibo tradition. He's Shipibo himself. And he serves the medicine of ayahuasca, grandmother. And me working personally with him, he's asked me to start working with tobacco. And this was a big ask for me because up until that point, I had no relationship and I had all this judgment with it. And what was happening was he made me a pipe. So I have my pipe with me right here. And he asked me to smoke my pipe before ceremonies, before during, after, for prayer. He was teaching me how to use tobacco. But what was happening was I was being really overwhelmed by it. I was using it. I was getting really heady. I felt like I had to vomit. Like it was a lot of energy, and I didn't know like how anyone could do this. It was just a lot for me. I would cough. I would feel like I would need to vomit. But I listened to my teacher and I continued to pray with it. And it was 2 weeks into me sitting with him and being isolated during a dieta where I was in a ceremony. And sure enough, I'm praying with my tobacco. I'm praying for my life, praying for the connection to the plant teachers. And then all of a sudden, tobacco comes. It was like this energy, this beautiful, powerful, like spirit. And I knew exactly who it was. And I was just overwhelmed with just like the beauty, the power. And tobacco says, hello. And I acknowledge him. And he goes, this is what you said about me. And it was almost like he put in front of me all the scenes of me cursing tobacco, cursing cigarettes, cursing these people, putting all this blame and energy and hatred towards him. And I said, yeah, I said that. And he goes, I forgive you, but know that I am medicine. And it is not me who is poison, but the relationship that humans have with me that is toxic. And that completely shifted my reality of how I look at this world. Because I, at one moment, had this judgment over this plant, this thing that has been here long before humans. And I had this energy and hatred pushing against it, unable to listen to the plan, unable to listen to the actual messages. And then in a moment, I was able to change my perception that this is not poison, but the relationship that humans have with it. And this changed my world. Because what are we doing in our lives that we're blaming and we're quick to judge? But at the core of it, it's medicine. And in our world, we find ourselves blaming things in our life. We're finding things like tobacco as a way out to blame instead of taking responsibility to the individual who is using the tobacco and the relationship. So why this talk is so near and dear to me is because there is so much. There's billboards, there's commercials, there's things on the back of the cigarettes. There are so many things that you can see online warning you against using tobacco, and it's not working. The reality is that it's actually shifting into vapes and other forms of use of tobacco. And because there are people like me that never used tobacco, that had no guidance for anyone else that was, struggling with smoking. And then there are people that are smoking cigarettes that are out on their own, learning it at bars and through, sleepovers as kids, they smoke their first cigarette. But the reality is the wisdom has always been there on how to use tobacco as medicine. And what we need to do when we're using tobacco, we need to understand this, that are we smoking tobacco or is tobacco smoking us? And what do I mean by that? Is we landscape our house, right? If you live anywhere, especially in the tropics, that if we don't landscape, if we don't actually have a way of trimming back the native bush, it will take over the house within days in some cases. So we need to be in relationship with nature to be able to be, are we being smoked or are we smoking? And it's this fine balance when we're using tobacco, because tobacco is what they would say in Native America or in North America. They would say tobacco is the energy of the sun. And that same energy that makes tobacco sacred is that same energy that could destroy us. We are truly playing with fire. It is something that is been worshipped throughout the Americas, through all of these indigenous communities. And they knew exactly what they were working with, and they knew the proper ways because they were listening to the plant on how to use them. And I posted on my Instagram many things of like, it was used as currency. There was such an intricate trade system in North America before the white settlers came, of they would actually use tobacco as a main form of currency to be able, and these trade routes and communication between these tribes was used with tobacco. Tobacco is used as fertilizer. Tobacco is used as a way of cleansing and protection. Tobacco is used medicinally for earaches, toothaches, many different things. And it was because of the relationship that the native people had with this tobacco that it made it medicinal. But we are so far from that. And to kind of speak on how I was taught to use tobacco, this is a big question. How do you make tobacco medicinally? First off, we need to distinguish between organic leaf tobacco and then what's being produced as far as vapes, cigarettes. If anyone has smoked a cigarette and anyone has smoked organic tobacco, mapacho, for instance, in my case, no one craves smoking tobacco. There's not a need like an empty calorie when you're eating bread or something. You could just keep eating it. It's the same thing with tobacco cigarettes. It has forms of chemicals and the good things that are taken out that keeps you craving it. So the organic tobacco has a different energy that is not keeping you craving it. It actually satisfies and grounds you. But with tobacco, they would say that when it becomes smoke, it becomes in spirit form. So the smoke of tobacco is the spirit of tobacco. And when we pray into tobacco, so my teacher taught me to pack my pipe and use it intentionally through prayer. So tobacco is like the messenger to Mother Earth, to the universe of our prayers. So when we load our pipes or a cigarette or any form of smoking it, we'll put our prayers into it. And another key thing with smoking tobacco, we never inhale it. Because when we pull it in more like a cigar and less like people are doing with cigarettes and vapes, it's never meant to go into our lungs, because our prayer becomes our own responsibility. It can't be heard. When we pull that in, it just stays with us. But when we pull it into our mouth and we release it, and when the smoke becomes clear, that's when my teacher says, that's when the Creator hears our prayer. That's when the message that we're putting into this plant is able to be out into the universe. And whether we believe that or not, I really encourage anyone who is stepping into using tobacco, just tune in to intentionally using tobacco, because we could reverse that. If people are using or smoking cigarettes, what are they normally doing? They're unknowingly putting their anxiety, stress, wants, desires, all of that into a cigarette because they're stressed out. They're using tobacco smoke in them. They're using it as a crutch. And then they pull that all into their lungs and it stays there. And that causes dis-ease. And it's just so mind-blowing learning the proper way, or at least how the Shipibo taught me how to smoke tobacco, and how we are using tobacco throughout our lives and through our society and our communities. We're seeing people either doing it through vapes, like in school now, to tobacco being used, multiple times a day as a form of relieving stress. But what that's doing is taking that stress and putting it deeper inside of them and causing them to take full responsibility over it. When tobacco was gifted to us originally as a way of protection, so it's a powerful clear. So we could blow tobacco smoke. If you've ever been in an ayahuasca ceremony, curunderos use tobacco as a form of cleansing and purifying. Tobacco is also medicine, is about grounding. If you've ever used tobacco, and this is why people are so drawn to cigarettes, it takes them out of here and it puts them back into their body. And what that is they're connecting them back with earth. And still in cigarettes is grandfather tobacco. We have to be clear on that. That plant still exists within the cigarettes. But it's asking us to listen to this plant and teach. And we have so much to learn from this plant, but not just this plant, but from all of existence, all of Mother Earth, all of plants is like waiting to teach us. And this is what native people knew from the beginning. They had a relationship that they were able to cultivate with listening to the plant. So there needs to be a radical shift when it comes to how we view tobacco. And I believe it's through awareness and education. We first need to be aware over the relationship that someone has with tobacco. That includes if we're blaming tobacco, we have something there, or if we are abusing tobacco on either side. We are both contributing to this whole mess. Because if we are unaware of the medicinal and the proper uses, we're unable to, not to say we have to use tobacco, but we're unaware to help and spread that message throughout our community, because it may affect someone in a way of saving someone's life. If we're using tobacco, there's a reason we're drawn to it. We could look at the addiction and the chemicals and all of those things, right? But there's an energy that exists within humans in tobacco that we need to acknowledge, and we're all drawn to it. This is why everyone knows tobacco. This is why it's so big. But instead of, if you've talked to anyone who's been trying to quit smoking, it's extremely challenging and difficult. I fully acknowledge that. But what's easier to do is to shift the relationship that an individual has to tobacco. And it first starts with radical responsibility and radical ownership. We need to take control over the relationship that we're having with our planet and our earth and things around us. And it may not be tobacco for you, but it may be coffee, maybe marijuana, maybe chocolate, cacao. It may be these other things that I, in the past, have quick to judge and all thought of them as poison, even alcohol. So I remember when I came out of that experience in the jungle, I healed my relationship and came back into right relationship with tobacco. And I was just like re-emerging from this like 3 months of isolation. And I went to Costa Rica, and I went to an event where it was opened by a woman who owns an ancestral brewery. And I'm sitting there, and I used to work in nightlife. I was a nightclub GM. I've served thousands, tens of thousands of drinks in bottles to thousands of people. And at that time, I was completely sober. I haven't drank alcohol in many years. And I saw this woman talking about her ancestral roots of brewing this drink called chicha from corn. And they would use this ceremonially to open up birthdays. They would have it to funerals, weddings, all of this, but they would do it intentionally and never overdo it. They would open and close each of these ceremonies with this brew. And she said, "Can I get a volunteer to help serve the audience and the attendees of this festival?" And I raised my hand and I ran up there. And I took this ancestrally brewed alcohol and I served it to over 100 people. And I thought to myself, wow, what else am I not taking responsibility for? What else am I blaming and labeling as poison, but it is medicine? And my focus and view turned to the relationship that humans are having with their environment, with their communities. And that's a shift. We need to come back into relationship with ourselves And there are many things in this talk. I don't pretend to be an expert on tobacco. I don't pretend to be an expert on any of these medicines. But what I do know is that the responsibility and the relationship that we need to have as human beings with what we're blaming, we need to look at ourselves first. Because really, if it comes from Mother Earth, like I used to blame corn. I looked at corn as monoculture, destroying the environment, destroying our soil. I am so wrong. And this is my story. I labeled it as I looked at it as one of the world's biggest issues on how Monsanto and what's happening with, especially in North America, how much corn we're producing. But when you go through North and Central America, corn is seen as the embodiment of Mother Earth. It was celebrated. That's their medicine. And I actually was gifted a piece of corn from a Mayan elder, and it has purple, yellow, like speckles all throughout it. It has all the DNA of all the corn out there. And they would celebrate this. And so coming back into viewing ourselves of how we're interacting, how we're centered, and how we're focusing on what we're blaming on, it needs to be on the relationship and coming back into that balance. This is the way out, or one of them. And it's a hard ask because I know that a lot of people, to have intention before even eating a meal, to slow down, to understand what we're doing, we're not going to be able to make change, but with everyone. I know that. But what we could start doing is taking responsibility for ourselves, taking responsibility over our own relationship. And then once we feel grounded in that, then we're able to spread that knowledge and wisdom throughout the world, because things are going to come up. Like the vapes are so big right now with our youth. It's like a huge issue. And I truly believe that if we had in our households, instead of tobacco as taboo and put over here, just a basic knowledge that this is a plant medicine, and have some form of communication that the native elders had with the native children about using it. And we got to have some form of communication within our household, within our communities, to be able to bring that into relation. And I'm curious, I want to now open this portion kind of up for questions. Like, what are things coming up as I have done this talk? What are questions about maybe use of tobacco? What are things you may be struggling with? Because I'm curious.
Can you talk a little bit more about like it's used? I know you talk a lot about it being used in ceremony, but like what exactly, like what are the prayers? What are the pieces of like tobacco that like can you pray with it for anything or?
It's a good question. So there are a few forms of using tobacco, and we don't always need to smoke it. There are ways of purifying the body. And so curandero, for example, and this doesn't have to be the medicine person serving the medicine. It could be anyone attending any ceremony. It is to be able to put your prayers and intentions for what's present with you. So there is no wrong prayer. Prayer is about something that naturally comes out through you. So my teacher says that stillness is meditation. Stillness with love is prayer. And so when we have an ability to be present, which stillness is, and we use love and we put that into tobacco, we're able to actually pull that in and blow it over the body. So a way of using tobacco is we'll pray and then we'll blow the smoke over our arms first, purifying our extension of our heart. Then we'll blow the smoke over our shoulders, blow the smoke over our heart and over our body. And what that's doing is putting our prayer and protecting ourselves with it. Tobacco has a very potent energy of protection. And this helps us go throughout our day. And we don't even need to be doing this for ceremony. We could be doing this before, at the end of a day, at the start of a day. We could be doing this before we go on a big adventure for protection and prayer. We could be doing this at a funeral. And another way of using tobacco is just having ground up organic tobacco. And what you could do is just take a pinch of it and hold it in your hand. And by holding it in your hand, you could bring it to your chest, you could bring it to your mouth, and begin to pray into it silently or openly. And then through that, you could actually offer it to the earth. And so that tobacco prayer is actually, like, plants actually love tobacco. The nicotine and the nutrition that's actually in tobacco, it could actually be shared with the earth. So the prayer could be kind of continued on. And that's a great, way where I was just reading about a tribe, and this is a number of tribes would use tobacco before they would have their own form of baptism with the water. And they would offer tobacco to the water before they would do the baptism, because they were talking to the spirit of water and calling on purification for this individual. And this is actually the same if they were about to grow their crops. This is the same if they were going into a new area. They would ask permission to be there. And also if they were going out and harvesting and taking from the land, they would leave a pinch of tobacco as reciprocity for them taking whatever they're taking. And that's a whole nother thing, the healthy harvest, to be able to take only what we need, but to ask permission. And when we ask permission from using tobacco. It's normally a one-way conversation when we go to land and we ask permission. It sounds kind of funny to say, but if we're able to go on a new piece of land that we've never been before and ask permission for being there, you could feel that it actually opens up. And a use of tobacco is a really potent way to do that. Great question. Anyone else have any questions regarding tobacco?
Hi, Parker. I'm here with Greg, but he has a bit of a stomach and wanted to ask a question about tobacco and hape and what the difference, if there is one, is.
Yeah. So when it comes to, there are so many ways to use tobacco, and I listed a few already. Hape is one of them. So if anyone's ever heard of hape, it's like tobacco snuff. It's what we see in crepes or tepes, used and blown up the nasal cavity. And just so everyone knows, we use hape as a form of clearing. So when we have repetitive mind loops, which we've all had, I know I have, when we can't get something out of our head, or we need to move energy, hape is used to clear that. If you've ever had a thought that you can't get out of your head, if you use hape, it's like a blank slate. It's like a white eraser. And the difference of hape and tobacco, hape is tobacco. It is ground up tobacco, but there is, in addition, other medicinal plants and ash that's added to hape. So the same way that you pray before you use your pipe is the same way you could do it with hape. It's the same way that the native people, mostly of Brazil, in the Amazon basin, that would use hape. They would use it in the same way. They knew to acknowledge that this was a powerful form of cleansing and purification. and they would intentionally put prayers into it and to be able to send that up the nose. And, you know, I encourage everyone who's like stepping into any form of plant medicine work is to really find a teacher and someone who has really sat with this medicine and has worked with it themselves, and so they can administer it to you and then teach you the way of how to do it. And I mean, there are many different ways to do hape, but there's also a lot of cultures through North and South America would chew it, and they would combine it with different leaves and sometimes seashells and chew it up, and it would actually make almost a psychoactive effect. And some would use it, obviously, some topically. So the resin that comes out of a pipe, if you ever clean a pipe, it's like black. That resin actually could be used on cuts and bug bites medicinally for the top of your skin. Yeah, so there's so many different ways, and I'm still learning different ways of using tobacco, but the principle is all the same. There was a story out of Colombia where this was their creation story, and they were gifted 5 master plants, and one of them was tobacco. And in this story, they said, tobacco allows you to use it however you need. That if you were to, you know, use it socially, use it as connection, use it as stress relief. But the agreement that these people had with the original tobacco, the original agreement was, by the end of the day, you need to use it as purification and prayer. And if you don't do that, there'll be major consequences, and it will destroy you. And like I said, we're playing with fire. And it's how to find that relationship, that we need to acknowledge that prayer and that purification always with tobacco, or things go haywire. And always when we're intentional about something, like if we, for example, food could be poisonous for people. People overeat, and we're seeing that today. If we were more intentional and actually tuned in before eating that second plate of food, and to say, is this something that I actually need, or is this craving taking over me? I guarantee we'd have a lot less overweight people. And it's the same for smoking or using any form of tobacco. So thanks for asking, Greg. Any more questions out there? I see a pipe in Marielle's hand. Is that right?
No, I'm not, just a pen.
Oh, it was a pen. Okay.
No, but I have my pack of cigarettes right here though.
Yeah, she's smoking. And so what I would say is, like, there's a lot of, you know, conversation around, you know, secondhand smoke. What are the figures with you know, using it in this way? And I asked that question when I was in the jungle, and my maestro said there's no cases of cancer or lung disease or anything used properly. Where his tribe was deep in the Amazon basin, he's like, this doesn't exist. And he asked his grandfather about, like, were people dying of lung disease? And it just didn't exist. And I know that when we're smoking, we need to make sure we're smoking outside, because that smoke is potent. And that if we're smoking in a confined space, we are breathing that smoke in. So making sure that we're outside. And I remember tobacco smoking is a social and community building medicine. I witnessed it firsthand. And I had a friend, a couple that came to me and wanted to work with tobacco. And so I have a community pipe that I was smoking my pipe, and I asked each of them, one, was doing a tobacco prayer and using it and offering it to the earth. The other one was smoking the tobacco. And then they switched. And I just witnessed in silence that they were able to organically open up to each other and feel grounded enough to speak things out in their relationship that they've never spoken out before. And I was just at witness to how when we use tobacco properly, there's a feeling of being safe. It's like this overwhelming protection that tobacco allows us to deliver and speak messages that we're afraid to speak in our everyday life, right? This is me. Like, I'm putting myself out there as saying tobacco is medicine. I'm getting heat for it, trust me. But I'm able to be grounded in this message because I have tobacco grounding me. And also what it does is allows people to receive messages because they feel safe. That's what's happening in this relationship that I witnessed. And I was like, holy moly, we're onto something. And it turns out, Native people have been using it in ceremonial smoke circles since the dawn of time. But I've been using it now in my community to not just talk about hard things, but also bring up things that are challenging, things that may be hard to say. But with tobacco, I'm able to deliver messages, and the messages are able to be received. You witness that, and it is pretty life-changing. And that's also a big medicine that I'm not seeing talked about, is the ability to communicate and feel safe and deliver messages from the heart. And that's what that medicine really does. So you were saying you had some cigarettes next to you. Would you be open to talking a little bit more about, not to put you on the spot, but would love to hear, where your relationship is and where it's been.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this actually follows into what I was gonna ask a question regardless, but like, I guess my question for you that I'll still ask is like, where would you put tobacco use? Because right now we're talking about ceremonial uses as well as having a lot of attention around it.
Yeah.
Where is tobacco's place in, like, obviously I feel like, day-to-day usage, is that kind of where we're playing with fire, basically, if you're just kind of using it unintentionally, using it habitually, because I think my relationship right now with tobacco is heading into intentionality, coming from a place of unintentionality. Obviously, we're all here for a reason, I think. But yeah, what would you, how would you prescribe tobacco would you even recommend it as a day-to-day thing, maybe, or at least on days that you work or something like this?
It's a really good question. And it is a tuning into, like I was talking about, are we able to tune into the frequency? Are we smoking tobacco, or is tobacco smoking you? Right? Is that feeling is this a craving or a crutch? Am I leaning on this? Or especially when you start using tobacco intentionally, you will be guided to be able to know exactly, like, when's a good time to smoke a pipe? When's a good time to actually use tobacco, right? And of course, we're using organic loose leaf tobacco, and I could definitely give you some options on like where to buy this good tobacco. But to be able to tune into ourselves is like, how do we know that eating too much is too much? The individual needs to be able to come up with that. Of course, there's a cadence, like too much, like if I'm smoking 10 pipes a day for the rest of my life, there's probably going to be some issues, right? But to be able to have that inner that inner guidance that I know you have, to be able to tune in when it feels good to you to be able to smoke. And so I can't say, because I don't know your frequency right now, but I know that it will eventually come into balance if you are intentional and you're able to tune into the medicine. And like I said, like I was with the Shipibo, and like, you know, my teacher's been smoking since he's like 10 years old, but he's been doing it in a certain way, and his teeth are fine, you know, all the things that you would think that tobacco had. His lungs are fine, super healthy, super vital. And it's because of his relationship. So that's what I would say. I would empower you to tune into what that is for you. And I know that frequency will find itself, but using it every day, if you're already smoking tobacco, you know, start with that. And then I guarantee it's going to come more into balance. Thanks for sharing and asking that question. Anyone else have?
What do you think about, I guess, smokeless, other smokeless tobacco options? I know you touched on vapes and all the maybe modern smoking methods, but kind of more in tune with the Hape. I know there's a lot of tobacco-free nicotine products, whether it be a Zen pouch or spray or mint or whatever it is. I'm hearing a lot on like different, call it the biohacker community on the internet. They're all touting the benefits of just pure nicotine, and I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I know a lot of these products are relatively new, but we could look at the track record of how humans have interfered with, you know, high fructose corn syrup, pure sugar. That's what I see just nicotine as. It is a small portion of it that's extracted, but to actually have the full benefits of the tobacco plant and the spirit of tobacco, all of the little components that we don't understand as scientists or understand in our way of producing a product, actually plays a whole part in making that experience powerful. And I have no doubt that a nicotine packet could help with cognitive effects. This is for sure another reason why tobacco is medicine. But I would almost put my bottom dollar that, you know, these Zens or these new things that are coming out, it's just, we don't know the consequence of it. the what will come out eventually, just like we thought Juuls were the savior and the ending of smoking cigarettes. That's what they were claiming, right? But the reality was that it actually is causing a lot of damage and harm. Will these things do that? I do not know. I am sure there's an intent, like a really clean way of doing it, but I would err on the side of caution. And if we really want to use tobacco or nicotine or any of these things, a synthetic or a manipulated way of stripping things down has never been good for humans. So that's what I would say about that. And I would also say, I had a friend, and he's not on this call, so I won't say his name, but he was going through a really challenging time, and he was using Hape quite a bit. So Hape is everywhere. It's really booming, not just in intentional conscious communities, but it's growing beyond that because it has a lot of potent power. And I witnessed him going through this challenging time because he in his own words, he was escaping the hell that was in his life. And I felt his pain, and I knew tobacco was holding him and carrying him. But I witnessed him do it multiple times throughout the day. And I said, I know this medicine is helping you right now, but because of you are relying on it, just like if we're like relying on someone too much or codependent or reaching, like we feel out of balance, right? There will be consequences. 100%. That's the biggest thing, is like, we are playing with fire. And if we're putting fire up our nose multiple times a day, we're going to have some issues. And I have had a friend who's a medicine woman that had a deviated septum surgery. And she had a surgery as if she was doing cocaine every day for 20 years. That's what her nasal cavity looked like. And so she overused it. And so we do need to be wary, even if we're using it intentionally, coming into that cadence of listening, not feel, I'm a Libra, so I'm all about balance. So if we ever feel like we're reaching or feel like we're, like barely keeping our feet, right? That's how I see it. Like we're almost stumbling over each other and we're using these medicines. Chances are that we're using it too much, or we're using it as a crutch. It's up for us to come back into balance before we even use these things. They may help us get there, but do not be the reason you get back there because of these medicines. You got to do it on your own. So good question, Johnny.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you are using it yourself, what's kind of your routine or the steps you go about, I guess, when you're using it?
Good question. And, for me, and this answers a kind of a few of them, like I have a feeling all of a sudden it's like this ping goes off. It's like whenever I have a feeling of, maybe someone's engagement, right? Or a birthday, or something that I want to have deep prayer, and to be able to send those off, right? It's like an inner knowing. My guide is to be able to use tobacco as that prayer. What I do is I tune in first. I make sure that I am in balance with myself to fully know and acknowledge what I'm about to do. That's really important. And then I'll take the tobacco and I'll load it in my pipe. If you don't have a pipe, you could just use like organic rolling papers. Really important to get those, because you don't want to have like those white bleached papers, because you're breathing that, or you're pulling that in as well. Then you're going to take it and you're going to pray to it. How the Shipibo taught me to pray is through a whistle. If you ever heard before a ceremony, it's like a right? Because the first way of cleansing, our first medicine is our breath. So our first thing that we come into this world with is our inhale, right? Our breath. And the last thing is our breath, to show that we have gone. It's our breath that actually connects us to our body. Without our breath, like when people are having these meditations and they have out-of-body experiences, their breath almost becomes nothing. And so their soul is able to leave. And so we use our breath to pray over the tobacco. And then, like I said, we're going to blow it over our arms first, because they're extension over of our heart. Then we're going to blow it over our shoulders and over our heart, and just use it to like blow it over your body. And then when you feel like you're cleansed, you're able to enjoy the rest of your roll or your pipe. And what I encourage is to go inwards, have silence, and just feel the energy coming back to Mother Earth, coming back to yourself, and listen to the message. Listen to, all of those insights and downloads and messages. They're there. Like I firmly believe from the bottom of my heart, we are guided and we are supported at all times. And we need to tune in and become still to be able to receive those messages. And tobacco is the way to do that. And if you don't have a connection to spirit or any of that, that's okay. I'm not saying that is necessary to use tobacco in this way. But what you could feel more maybe is your intuition, or maybe you could see your path more clearly, or maybe you'll find forgiveness in these different emotions that actually elevate our state of being instead of bringing down. And so that's what happens when we use it intentionally, is we're there to to open ourselves up and feel safe to be able to hear these things, receive the messages. Thank you for the question, Gabby. Chris.
What's up, brother? Thank you so much for hosting this. Can you get?
I can hear you.
Yes. No, I may have poor reception. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So one of the things, so tobacco has just come into my field and it's coming in hot. And I guess my question would be, going back, you were talking about finding a guide or somebody who's more experienced. I don't know even where to start, where to start with that, to be totally honest, because I feel like there's so much indoctrination in our society about tobacco, as you are obviously experiencing hosting calls like this. So I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations about, like, if I want to self-start, or where to find a guide, or like what kind of circles, because you're the leader of this section of that for me. So I don't know anybody.
Yeah. Well, let's lean into, I'm that guy for you as well, and happy to start that. I know that brothers on this call like Kenny and Julian, and other people that are more in the Venice area, are pipe carriers, and they've been using tobacco intentionally, and they're definitely really powerful stewards of it. And to reach out to, let's say, starting with us, but as a whole, and anyone who's listening to this, a way of starting to finding a teacher. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I know that in my life, in the people that have guided me, that if we ask the universe, and we ask, even if you're using tobacco as a form of just offering, or if you're starting to smoke it, that teacher will appear. And I have full faith that that will happen. So anyone who's watching this, but Chris in particular, and anyone on this call or watching it, please reach out. And we could even do an online session in smoking a pipe. I'm happy to do that, because it starts with a small movement, and that could, help, our parents, our future generations. We need to tune in and make decisions for 7 generations in the future. We may never see the fruits of us changing these relationships, but the making decisions now is, how are we acting? What are we buying? What are we voting with? That is affecting 7 generations in the future. And that's what we really need to be tuning into. And that's what, a famous chief in the Native American movement, 7 generations ago, they planned for, all of these white settlers coming. They're like, we need to make decisions now to be able to preserve our culture. And we're in the 7th generation since that chief said that. And forgive me, I don't know his name, but this is the next 7 generations we need to plan for. And being in relationship with this is the key. I know we're coming up on an hour. I want to take 1 or 2 more questions, and then I have a little announcement afterwards. Amy, Eve, Fifi,
It's
Raheem.
Evie, but you're close.
Evie, sorry, my apologies.
That's okay. That's okay. Most people don't get it right. So my question was about your rituals with this. And I was recently gifted my own sacred pipe. I won't give him a shout out, but he's around. Cool. And I'm curious about going a little deeper on that, if you don't mind sharing, about the ritual of the community aspect and how you're using that. So outside of being grateful for or wanting to pray on certain life events that are happening for you or others, how are you using this through community?
Yeah.
And in sort of a routine basis to meet others and so forth. Interested about how that sort of factors in outside of the individual power of this ritual.
Yeah. I thank you for bringing this up again, because it is so potent for me and my community. And a question, especially for the person who gave you this pipe, is this a pipe personally for you and only your use? Because some of my pipes are only for me to use, and that's my connection, and I'm the only one that touches them. And then I have a pipe that is for community and sharing. And the South American traditions, a lot are for individual pipes, and then North American, they very much have a community aspect of it. So tune in also to yourself. Is this pipe for me, or is this pipe for my community? And like, for example, I have my community pipe here, and how we use that is we just get everyone who wants to smoke a pipe or be present for the circle to gather around and to be in a circle where we all face each other. And you know, we pack our pipes, we have smiles, or we have whatever is going on, and then we drop into silence, we drop into ourselves, we drop into our individual prayer, right? So if everyone, like, for example, if this is just your pipe, you could have that organic tobacco and have rolls for everyone else, so they have their opportunity to do that. Or if it's a community pipe, you have everyone have an option to pray over the tobacco before you light it. And then the blowing and the purification that you could do for yourself, but then you could pass the pipe around, or everyone's independently smoking their tobacco. And what happens naturally is that there's this deep silence that it's like silence and presence. It's just so, you could just feel it. And what happens is something will naturally occur. Just allow it. There's no pressure. Sometimes I've sat with people on this talk for 30 minutes and haven't said anything. And sometimes being in silence with people that we love is potent enough. And that's enough. Or sometimes something comes out that's present for someone. Maybe it's forgiveness. Maybe it's something that's present for them, a powerful download, a message. Allow that to come through, and maybe a little guidance beforehand. Just say, hey, tune into yourself, stay in the silence. But when something wants to come out, allow it. And what happens is just, I'll be sitting there, and then someone just says exactly what I was thinking, or leading with vulnerability. Someone opens it up and shares something. And then what happens is we all feel safe to be able to share and communicate. Our judgments are like, that filter is almost gone. It kind of leaves us. So we're able to be more open-minded to just learn more. So that's how I use it in the community circles. Say, let's go smoke a pipe. That's why I make sure I buy everyone that I love pipes. So that if that answers your question, that's an intentional way how I use it. Yeah. All right. So I'm so grateful for everyone joining this call. I hope this was super insightful, and to take all of this and just spread it out to the world, but really tune into yourself first, embody, the lessons and the messages, and then share it. And I'm going to make sure this video is captured, recorded, and then put on my website and YouTube, make this into a podcast as well. So it could just be put out there, and happy for you guys to share that. Because really, like, I am so grateful for the collaboration with everyone co-creating this experience. And one announcement that I'm launching are these talks, and starting with tobacco as my number one. And the next one is going to be Commitment is Freedom. And that's going to be next month. And what I say about commitment is there to support us. When we are fully committed and we learn the skill of making commitments, And imagine if we did everything we said, we would be unstoppable. And I see a commitment as a sacred note to ourselves that's there to support us. And I'm doing a talk next month on commitment. And I'm launching my coaching program for the new year around commitment. And it's called Commitment is Freedom. And invite anyone to come to the talk if you're interested in group and individual coaching. But I'm so grateful for tobacco leading me and pushing me into expressing myself on these talks. And I'm really excited to launch my next one, Commitment is Freedom. And I invite everyone to show up and to be there and share the link and do all that. And I'll have that recorded as well. And to really lean into bringing that sovereignty and that full radical responsibility over our lives into ourselves. And that's what the container is at the beginning of the year for our resolutions. The worst thing we could do for ourselves is make a commitment and break it. Because what happens is we make a sacred note to ourselves, and then when we don't do it, it actually, that support system falls away and we feel like we're out of balance or lost. And I see this so much. It's a big issue where people aren't being impeccable with their word. They're not following through with things. People are being flaky. This is also a very large issue in the world. And I want to bring light that a commitment is there to support us. The number one reason to make a commitment is to support us. And we only need to make a few commitments to be able to create a path. And that's what commitments are there for. So I'm really excited to share that talk next month. I'll send that in the newsletter. I have all your emails, and I really appreciate everyone's presence here. And many prayers and blessings to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Park.
Yeah. All right. Love you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Aho.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.